air in Silicon Valley is thin, electric, and always intoxicating. It's where ambition is not just a virtue, but a moral imperative. And at the heart of that world, a figure emerged, almost perfectly sculpted to embody its promise. Evelyn Reed. She had the vision, the singular focus, and the unwavering belief in a future she alone saw. Her company was Aethelred, and its promise was a revolution. No more thick syringes and vials of blood. Justa singale. Pinprick drop fed into a sleek, proprietary box they called the Phoenix. The promise: instant diagnosis, cheaper, faster, and accessible to everyone. The reality, as we would come to learn, was a meticulous, decade-long fabrication that would not just steal fortunes, but shattered trust in the very idea of innovation. Our story begins not with a crime, but with a whisper of pure, untainted hope in the sprawling, polished glass halls of FS. Headquarters, a place where the lighting was always precisely managed to give the illusion of clarity. The first crack in the flawless surface was almost inaudible. Dr. Artur Banse, a man of quiet, scientific integrity, was head of the clinical labs. He walked through the pristine, controlled environment, the very atmosphere suffocating him with its forced perfection. In his hand, a printout. Discrepancies. Major ones. The machines, the famous Phoenix analyzers, were generating data points that defied biological possibility, yet management insisted they were perfect. Vance found Marcus Kane, the company's powerful chief operating officer, seated in a minimalist office, the desk bare save for a single crystal water glass. Kane, a man with the unnervingly still demeanor of someone who never had to raise his voice, merely glanced up. Problems. Dr. Vance. Kane's voice was measured, a calm current beneath which Vance could sense a deep, icy river of impatience. Vance pushed the paper across the polished surface. The T3 panel on the latest batch. Marcus says, it's off by 80%. We are pulling patient data, comparing it to samples run on third-party machines. Our results are medically unreliable. We can't roll this out. Not yet. Kane did not touch the paper. He steepled his hands. Aethelred is a disruptive force. Arthur. Disruption looks messy to those who prefer the old ways. We are working on a tighter algorithm. Until then, we will ensure the lab's reports reflect our proprietary process. No external comparisons are to be made. Is that clear? The silence stretched, thick with implied threat. Vance swallowed, the muscles in his jaw tight. He was a scientist, not a corporate warrior. His eyes dropped to the floor for a beat. Understood. But as he turned to leave, the weight of the lie settled on his shoulders, a betrayal not just of science, but of the patients whose lives hung in the balance of a faulty machine. Evelyn Reed herself rarely dealt with the technical friction. She moved in a different sphere, a world of private jets, former secretaries of state, and media moguls, all drawn to the siren song of a $9 billion valuation. We see her now, in a high-stakes meeting room, the lighting warm and golden, designed to soften the edges of ruthless calculation. Across the vast table sat Senator William Hastings, an aging icon whose endorsement was gold. He leaned forward, his gaze fixed on red. Evelyn, the data. We need to present a concrete validation study to the Defense Committee. They need proof, not projections, but peer-reviewed clinical data. Red, dressed in her signature stark attire, leaned back, her voice deep and steady, a tone she had carefully cultivated. Senator, the technology is under a non-disclosure agreement with a major pharmaceutical partner. We are revolutionizing diagnostics for their global trials right now. I can't give you the granular data. Not yet. But I can give you the signed partnership agreement and our internal revenue projections. We are scaling. Profitability is imminent. This is not a study, Senator. This is a deployment. She slid a glossy binder across the table. It contained a fabricated financial model and a document bearing a pharmaceutical company's logo, placed there without their consent. Hastings picked it up, feeling the weight of the expensive paper. He looked into Reed's eyes, searching for a flicker of doubt, a shadow of uncertainty. He found only the blazing light of conviction. The belief was so total. It felt stronger than truth. He took a deep breath. the air in the room thick with the scent of high-grit paper and high-risk capital. Very well, Evelyn, but the clock is ticking on my end. I'm putting my name on this. The pressure on Evelyn Reed was not external. It was self-inflicted, born of a narcissism so profound it allowed her to rationalize the lie as a necessary step toward the inevitable future. She wasn't committing fraud. She was simply forcing reality to catch up with her vision. This dangerous rationalization was the emotional core of Aethelred's downfall. The emotional toll was heaviest on the younger employees, those who had joined Aethelred believing in its humanitarian mission. Eliza Chun, a bright, young engineer, had been tasked with calibrating the Phoenix machines. She sat late one night in the lab, the only sound the low hum of cooling fans, staring at a small container of patient blood, the infamous nanotainer, unable to shake the gnawing guilt. She had been instructed to delete error logs and rerun tests on traditional machines, then manually overwrite the Phoenix data with the accurate results. Her hands, resting on the cold metal bench, were visibly trembling. She opened a secure company email, composing a draft to Dr. Vance, even though he had resigned weeks ago, unable to bear the weight. I cannot continue to put patient lives at risk. The potassium levels are critically wrong on a quarter of the panels. Someone will die because of this deception. She hesitated, her finger hovering over the send button. The fear of Kane's silent retribution, of being branded a traitor, was a physical vice gripping her chest. She remembered the corporate culture. Walls of secrecy, departments compartmentalized. No one allowed to see the whole picture. All dissent met with immediate, chilling hostility. Kane had a way of making you feel small, replaceable, and morally bankrupt for simply questioning the process. Elisa closed the email without sending it. Instead, she opened a separate encrypted channel on a personal laptop she kept hidden in her locker. The choice had been made, not out of heroism, but out of a desperate need to cleanse her own conscience. She was becoming a ghost in her own life, living inside a terrible secret. The investigation began not with a grand subpoena, but with a relentless, quiet pressure exerted by a single investigative journalist, Jonathan Graves. He worked from a cramped, anonymous office miles away, piecing together the fragments of the truth from anonymous tips, including Eliza Chun's carefully worded, untraceable messages. Graves sat across a cheap plastic table from a former Aethelred lab technician, Noah Banks. Banks was visibly nervous, his gaze darting to the door every few seconds. He gripped a worn plastic cup of coffee, his knuckles white. They monitored everything, Mr. Graves. Our emails, our phone calls. I saw Marcus Kane personally go into the server room and pull test data. Deliteth Italiano. He made us use the commercial lab equipment for the real results, but told the investors we were using the Phoenix. Banks paused, the silence filled with the clatter of silverware from the diner. When I raised my concerns, Kane pulled me into his office. He didn't yell. He just talked about how much I loved my daughter, how much I needed my job. He looked me in the eye and said, "You are loyal to the mission, or you are an obstacle to the future." I quit that week. I couldn't sleep. The money wasn't worth the sin. Graves scribbled notes, his pen moving with quiet urgency. The atmosphere was one of profound moral exhaustion. The story was no longer about a failed technology. It was about the psychological warfare waged to sustain a lie and the cost of accountability. The climax arrived in the stark, unforgiving light of a federal courtroom. Years had passed. The sleek office buildings of Aethelred were now skeletal monuments to hubris. Evelyn Reed, her cultivated voice now strained, her composure fracturing under relentless scrutiny, sat opposite the prosecutor, Agent Harper. The interrogation was cold, professional, and deadly precise. Harper held up one of the glossy, fabricated reports given to Senator Hastings. "Ms. Reed, the evidence shows you knew the Phoenix was inaccurate. We have lab logs, testimony from 3 whistleblowers, and the documentation that proves the majority of patient tests were run on machines manufactured by your competitors. Why? Why? Continue the fraud. Was it fear of failure, or simply a hunger for more capital?" Reed's jaw trembled almost imperceptibly. She leaned into the microphone, her voice a strained whisper of its former commanding tone. I believed in the potential. It was an iterative process. Every great invention looks messy in the middle. I was fighting to change the world. Sometimes, to achieve something great, you have to cut a few corners. I was not defrauding anyone. I was simply protecting the future. Agent Harper did not raise his voice. He simply placed a single, faded photograph on the stand, a picture of a woman with a slight smile. This is Clara Vance. She was a patient. She received a false negative from an Aethelred test, missing the early warning signs of an aggressive cancer. She died 6 months later. Did you consider Clara Vance a necessary corner, Ms. Reed? Either life or her husband's pain? Register in your pursuit of a $9 billion valuation. The question hung in the silence, like the pull of gravity. Reed's practiced composure finally shattered. She covered her mouth, her eyes fixed on the photograph, the weight of the undeniable consequence of her actions crushing her carefully constructed reality. The room was utterly still. The only sound, the low hum of the air conditioning, a sound that, for the first time, felt like a judgment. She had chased a mirage of glory, and in doing so, had condemned not just herself, but others, to irreversible suffering. Sometimes, one wrong choice can destroy a lifetime. Learn from their story. Choose kindness. Choose life. This was just the beginning. The most mysterious and shocking crime stories are still ahead. Subscribe to Crime Flow Narratives and be among the first to uncover what comes next.